In the pandemic, people wanted hope. My son, in October of 23, he said, "Dad, if this will save people's lives, it needs to go out. If Christ died in vain and we have no hope here except in him, and if it's not been God's path, God's hand in this, I would not be here where I am now."
This interview features personal experiences and opinions from a biologist and PhD researcher. This is not medical advice. For health decisions, always consult a qualified medical professional. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining the Levine Show again. I'm still on the road in Burlington, Ontario, and I'm meeting with two amazing gentlemen who had a faith-based connection when they met at church to go ahead and help each other go through everything that we're all going through, which is this journey of life where we're trying to find our way. I've got Dr. David Speicher and his friend Delford Snyder, who's joining me today. And Dr. David Speicher, once again, we meet again.
Yeah, it is so nice to be here. Most know of my science and the DNA and the SVV4 T and the David Declaration and stuff, but I've never shared my journey through COVID, how I've worked and I've lost 5 jobs, and to really show how God's hand in all of this kept me on his path. I could have been so easily caught up in the science, and then to show when I was at the darkest, how God used me, who talks like I do, to do big things. And I have Del here, who changes my oil on the car. And I met him at church in Huntsville, and we've wrestled and we've challenged each other and we've fought. I'm very thankful that in the darkest times that Del's been there to challenge and encourage and spur on, and yeah.
Well, Del, as they say, that old saying, behind every truth teller is a great mechanic. Here's how you guys met. So did you meet as a mechanic or did you meet in church?
We met for the first time at a men's retreat weekend, and a division of the men's at Faith Baptist in Huntsville, just where David grew up, and I moved from Kitchener-Waterloo about 4 kilometers from where he grew up, which is 30 minutes west of Huntsville, but that's where we met.
Excellent, a men's retreat. Time to get away and kind of reconnect as men, but also to other men to hear some of the stories and look for some companionship or friendship.
Yep. Yeah.
Tell us a bit more about your church.
So it's a Baptist church. I'm born and raised in Huntsville, outdoors, fish hunt. I've been taught as a kid for how I talk. I've always loved science. I wanted to be a MD doc to help people, and then I learned of viruses, cool non-living things that can kill people. Some of them kill people and some don't. In grade 12, my guidance counselor in Huntsville High told me, because of how I talk, not to go on to university. I won't make it. Did undergrad here in Hamilton and went to Australia and did a master's in clinical microbiology and a PhD in virology. I've worked in Australia, Cambodia, India, Africa. And in 2014, my wife was somehow with child. I have no idea how that occurred, and it's quite a cool thing because we came back to Australia in Feb of 14. I was sick with para-typhoid, and I was like, yeah, sick. A week later, she gets sick, exact same signs and symptoms, and I'm thinking, oh, she's got para-typhoid, better get this looked at, and then no, she's fine. She's just 4 weeks with child, so.
Well, maybe a little bit later I'll explain to you how that works. But for now, Dal, so when you met him at the men's retreat, I'm sure something compelled you or guided you to kind of spend some time with him. Can you share some of that?
And so I came home in June of 14, and we met shortly after that.
Yep. So we had owned the property up there since 2020. And in 2013, I sold my business in Kitchener-Waterloo and moved to Huntsville. And shortly thereafter, about a year later, is when I met him at a men's retreat. And I don't recall exactly how the circumstances were, but there was interaction. But I do remember, and David said he didn't remember this, but I do remember David saying that what attracted him to me was that I was very comfortable in giving him the time to express himself. And he hadn't always come across that. So I explained to him why that was, and it's because I grew up with my youngest sister. There were 8 of us. I was the middle of 8. My youngest sister had Down syndrome, and she was almost nonverbal. So I was used to understanding, and I always told him this, my sister thought we were the dummies because she understood everything any of us said, and she could not grasp why we couldn't understand her. So it was a different dynamic. So I never had that blockage in dealing with David because I naturally was comfortable in dealing with it. And a lot of people aren't comfortable with that. And it's a blockage that he deals with. He was bullied as a child. He's bullied as an adult.
Yeah.
Mostly emotionally, but even professionally. And that's happened in his professional life because people aren't comfortable. And if they don't feel at ease in a circumstance, some people lash out. So, and he was just, we were drawn to each other probably with that dynamic. And then we got to know each other, and there were other things we had in common.
Yeah.
So
That's very
became
special
something good.
with
Yeah.
your sister and her perspective. That's precisely how she sees the world. People have a hard time understanding her.
Yeah.
So you related a bit with David as well because you've felt that struggle as well.
Yep.
And you had the patience to
Yep.
sit and listen to him. Because there's a lot more to the delivery of how someone talks. There's a lot more behind that, and you
Yeah.
understood that. Now, you just met my son just before this, who was also Down syndrome. And you just opened my eyes to how he may see the world as well. Because he's a smart little guy, and he definitely understands what's going on. But being able to share through vocabulary and nonverbal is a struggle, and we're working through that as well.
Yeah.
So go ahead and take us through after this miracle birth of yours, you're not sure how you got, and then you met Adele as well shortly after that.
So I met Adele. I came home in 2006. I joined Master University and St. Joe's Healthcare as a postdoc research fellow. Master's in Australia is on coronaviruses and PCR tests and stuff, and so I came home and I worked on diagnosis of infectious disease, difficile, STIs, HPV, and so I was working at Mac for Dr. Andrew MacArthur to whole genome sequence C. difficile. And when the pandemic broke out, we started in January of 12 to make a method to sequence the SARS-CoV-2 virus. I helped the team. We first isolated the virus, and so our work on sequencing and tools and test methods was first out in Feb of 20. I was in talks with public health and Ontario on how to test for the virus and sequence it. And I was first sidelined under investigation March 17th of and so that really changed my path.
So, right, well, good thing the guidance counselor was wrong. So you were one of the first people who were sequencing
Yep.
the virus in January 2020.
Yep.
By February 2020, again, very early.
We first isolated and PCR tested things at Sunnybrook, and U of T would be March 8th. At the time, I was in talks with public health to work out a sequence the virus, and that day really was the key change of stuff.
So 9 days later, you said the 17th.
I was
sidelined.
yeah, and pulled into a HR Zoom meeting with HR, head of the department, and my supervisor. And just like Dr. Francis Christian's HR call, I asked, what have I done wrong? And I was told, you'll find out next week. I asked multiple times, what have I done wrong? You'll find out next week. Next week turned into 10 weeks of silence. I was sent home. I was paid. I was told I'm under investigation, and therefore I can work on anything else. I cannot touch anything related to the pandemic.
You want the backdrop to that?
Yeah,
shared?
go for it, go.
Okay.
Wow.
What's really interesting here, something that's quite important, is David, hearing what was going on in the rest of the world, he was working on C. diff, and his co-worker became his
Yep.
co-worker, was working under a different professor
Yep.
on something else. And David suggested that they cooperate together and start this team focusing on COVID because it's going to come here.
Exactly.
So he was actually instrumental in starting that team at McMaster. That's important for what happened. The issue was, he was telling me a little bit. He hadn't shared much about what he was doing. And one day he was at my place while we were doing some work on his truck. And I just had this overwhelming sense. Just a sense came across me.
Yeah.
And I told him, David, you need to start intentionally keeping track of every type of communication you have with anybody you're working with. There were just some red flags going off with what he was sharing with me. And he said, what do you mean? I said, recording your phone calls, recording your messages, you're talking to people in the lab. Well, can I do that? I said, as long as you're only recording something you are part of, you can legally do that. You don't have to tell anybody you're doing it if you are part of the conversation. You can't record to other people,
Right.
but as long as you're part of the conversation, you can do that. To David's credit, he did that. So he kept his emails, text messages, recordings of everything, including, that was really important because when they did eventually suspend him, he came the week before that, and I remember him telling me that his boss, it's not employer-employee when you're he's basically a professor in training when you're a postdoctorate
Yep.
fellow. So his overseer came to him and said, David, you haven't done anything wrong, but you're not making wise decisions at this point in time in history with public health in Ontario.
Oh, wow.
That's what was said to him. And we will talk about this. We'll have a meeting on Friday.
So
this was a Wednesday.
On Monday, because that week he was on vacation.
That's right. And all I remember is a sense came to me and I said, go to the meeting, but don't be surprised if they don't tell you anything. And they didn't.
They told me nothing in that time.
So then they came out with these accusations against David. There were two accusations that they were basing their removing him from his position as far as actually working. So they kept paying him. He's under contract. So they locked him into his contract but wouldn't allow him to work. So that basically made him unable to take any other process from anywhere, right? So what these accusations were is that he was falsely claiming to be a part of the COVID team. Now remember, I just said he kind of started it, okay? The second thing is his process at the beginning, as he said when he talked to Public Health Ontario, he was working with them in trying to find a process of collecting data. So he was doing what is called setting up a bait capture program.
Yep, yeah.
That was his job. And he'd got that and was trying to get it to Public Health Ontario, and his overseer was on holidays in the midst of a pandemic.
Yeah, and two, I asked, am I allowed to go and meet them? And I was told, yes, of course, sure. And I asked, how much info can I share? Because at that time it was all done behind doors and stuff. And all I was told was not much. And not much isn't nothing. Not much means just enough to get things going and off the ground.
Okay, so before we continue, were they saying you were not part of the COVID team, or were they saying there is no COVID team? Like, what were their allegations there?
They were saying he's not part of the COVID team. He's falsely, and the reason it was being said is there was the second component to that. So he was asked by his fellow worker to get certified to work in the BSL-3 lab at Sunnybrook, right, or U of T?
Mac.
At MAC, because that's where he was doing the in the lab work. All right. So David's doing the other work, and now David's part was going to be to sequence the work that they did, which is basically verifying
virus
for a record, right?
Was any other teams around the world or in Canada doing this as well?
There was a lab in Hong Kong and in Australia, and I knew both of those scientists.
So this was the only one in Canada
The
trying to
only one
sequence
in-
the virus.
Canada here.
And the purpose of sequencing the virus is for the PCR testing, to understand
To
it.
find out what's there, to get PCR tests off the ground, there's surveillance, sequencing, and to track this advancement of this pandemic.
The advancement of the pandemic and maybe mutations or any
That's
other
right.
involvements. Wow, this seems like important work that
Oh,
should be
And not
happening.
just
Of course
that,
it's important.
in normal circumstances, that is also what is required for vaccine production.
Correct. Correct. You need to understand what the sequence is.
Mm-hmm.
Like we did I was early in my career, I was a tech guy, and I worked with a company that was sequencing the human genome way back in the early 2000s. So this is stuff that we've been doing for quite some time.
Exactly.
So this seems to be one of the steps in science to understand what you're doing.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're in March, moving our way through April.
So there he is. So ironic in the timing. So the next accusation was, now he'd been asked by his coworker to get certified.
Yep.
The next accusation was that he's claiming that he was asked to get certified when he wasn't. Well, they didn't know that David had been given some guidance to record things.
Emails,
So he had
I had
all the
emails and everything
information
else.
to refute both these accusations. Accusation number one disappeared. They never talked about it again as soon as he responded with his evidence. They never talked about the accusation one again.
Right.
Accusation number two got a little murky. So at exact the time where he went to Public Health Ontario, it just had happened that at that exact same time, his coworker claimed to have actually isolated the virus in the lab.
Yep.
And he sent him some information on his cell phone, one with a picture.
Yep.
David asked, what can I show him? What can I show? All he did was showed the picture of the virus that was sent. We've all seen it, the picture of the spikes with the yellow
Yep.
spike protein on the end of the little barbs. Everybody in the world's seen it.
No, all I received is a cytopathic effect, which
Yeah.
is cell monolayer and then there's holes.
Yeah.
And I was told we have the virus,
Yeah.
it's here, tear it up, and it's there, and now we're going
So here's the irony, is that second claim was that he had shared
confidential information
confidential information with Public Health Ontario
With Public
In
Health
an
Ontario.
email.
with Public Health Ontario.
in an email.
Right.
So he of course is keeping me all up to date on all these
I never
accusations. I saw all the
shared an email.
paperwork.
I showed him a picture. That was it.
Public
And I
Health
told
Ontario.
David,
Public.
don't tell them anything until they show you.
Now, who's they in this? McMaster?
This is the McMaster
Yeah.
HR.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I said, don't tell them anything until they come up with the goods that show you what they're accusing you of. So tell them to show you what you supposedly shared. Is it an email? Show the email. If it's it. He made a mistake of telling them about the picture he showed them. Guess what happened?
They use that.
That
They
was the
focused on
only
that.
thing they ever talked about from then on. And prior to that, their accusations against David, they didn't even know about the picture. So that wasn't part of what they initially used to suspend him. But from then on, that was the only thing. And that's what they ended up using to justify claiming that there was substantial enough evidence that he had broke professional protocol to eliminate his position.
Okay, so we'll get to that in a second. I do want to clarify to everybody, Canada is a single-party recording country.
Yep.
So you're absolutely correct, as long as one party is in the conversation and is aware it's being recorded, completely legal. So you did good guidance there. I'm glad you got that, and hope everybody watching understands that and does that as well. But let me try and get my little head around this one. So because McMaster, which was doing some research, somebody shared a picture with you, and you shared that with Health Ontario.
Yeah.
That's what they're using as a breach of confidentiality?
The director of virology and a colleague of mine at Public Health Ontario.
Are they claiming proprietary information?
I wasn't even told.
Was there a confidentiality stamp on it, or
Nope.
private, or don't
Nope.
share, or
Nope.
nothing?
Nothing.
Just a colleague shared a picture and you shared that.
Nothing.
Now, what was your purpose of sharing this with Health Ontario?
Because I was asked in a lunch eating with him. He said, I heard Sunny Brook is working on isolating this virus. Are you working with them? And I said, yes, we are. It's been isolated. And I showed him the picture.
Wow.
And that was it.
You would expect this to be on purpose, like they should be sharing this information, trying to collect this.
As Doug Ford said early on, all hands should be on deck, involved and doing this. And yet, as I'm a Christian right-wing white conservative with moral values, because that night at supper I was asked about my morals and thoughts on things, and I shared them. And then that evening in a celebration party at a doctor's house, I was asked about stuff, so I shared. And it's really ironic because I was asked about my link up with my master's supervisor in Australia, Ian McKay. Go for it.
Do you want me to fill you
Yeah,
in?
go for it. Fill it in.
So it's really interesting how this all fit together, because it was mind-blowing how evidence came. Defies logic. So he's been suspended. They won't tell him anything about it, trying to figure out why. So we're dialoguing a lot, and he's not feeling very good. He's pretty depressed.
I was sidelined. My career path was just taking off. I'm in a cool pandemic. It should be my field, and I'm benched, and it hurt. And I was isolated, lockdowns, isolation, everything else. Right?
You're also being labeled as somebody that doesn't cooperate or follow procedure,
That's right.
or being accused.
Yeah.
So there he is, feeling that his career is being completely sidelined because of what they're doing, and he doesn't even know why. So we looked together, okay, let's figure out why. So I started asking him a lot of questions, and one thing that came out early, which led us down a bit of a rabbit hole, although might have been partially true, he had reached out in frustration to an online newspaper in Huntsville
Yeah.
because he was very vocal about Justin Trudeau not closing the borders.
No. All of this occurred a week before I was sidelined.
I know that. Oh, I know
And
that.
I was asked for my thoughts of why things aren't shut. And I've seen it take off in China. I ran Italy. And I said, if this is so bad, our borders need to be shut. And I was told I'm fear-mongering.
Right, so you're actually calling early to kind of isolate and lock
Exactly.
down almost.
Yeah.
This is 2020, right? So this
Yeah.
is when we're all doing our 2 weeks to
Early
flatten the
on.
curve, right?
So it's interesting, like that's where we're trying to find out why he was suspended, right? So I'm trying to help him, and that was like, well, can you fill me in, like what's happened in the meantime? You know, I sent some things I told you to record. Now this has happened, but is there something you haven't told me about? So he hadn't told me about the newspaper article. He hadn't told me that any of that. And I, oh man,
Maybe
but
that's
do you really
it.
think that they're gonna publish that without reaching out for comment for the other side? That was my thought process.
Okay.
So we started going that route. I contacted Doug Ford's office. I contacted my MP up in Huntsville.
Yep.
And I got an education on the way politics was involved in that situation, I'll tell you. I'll start with Doug Ford. I got right through to his scheduler. I was told that within 2 hours I'd have a phone call. And then it went dark.
Mm-hmm.
And they refused to communicate with me after that. And I had them immediately communicating with me before that. So something happened there. That was about the same time, if you remember watching Doug Ford on the news, where he was like a deer in the headlights.
Yeah.
Something happened to Doug Ford through that process. That's another conversation. Then I talked to my MP, and he said, basically, I don't know, I'll look into it.
Yeah.
Ironically, a year later, when I talked to him again, he couldn't even remember that conversation. And I called him out on that, and it got really testy. But quite frankly, one thing he said to me really bothered me at that time is he says, until this situation, the pandemic is over with, we as an opposition cannot do anything.
Yeah.
And my answer was, how much do you think to be left of our country by then if you don't do something now?
Yeah.
That's what I felt about it. So it was really interesting then. It led us to another process of, okay, what could have caused it? So that when he talked to Public Health Ontario, those two circumstances, his co-worker, for the first time talking to him about what he believed, who he was very unhappy with his conservative leaning and really unhappy about his Christianity, which is strange. But what really triggered it was when he asked him about his education. We heard you were in Australia. He said, yeah. Well, tell me where. He said, well, University of Queensland. And then they asked, did you ever meet Ian Mackay?
Yep.
He shared the story of his interaction with Ian Mackay, which was not good, ended in a complete change in that man's trajectory for his career.
Mm-hmm.
And he was angry, his coworker. 2 days later, he's suspended.
Oh.
Okay? So here's a part of this story we hadn't shared yet. In the meantime, this went over a period of months, okay, where he hadn't been told anything. We're trying to figure this out. He's already got a lawyer who agreed to take his case against McMaster
Yep.
and the overseer of the lab
An employment lawyer?
Yep.
Okay.
because, according to the lawyer, this is a winnable case. So they took it on spec, meaning we'll get paid when we win. So you got to
Yep.
remember this now, because things changed.
Yep.
I was doing some research one time and I came across something that just showed up on my screen, and this happened a lot while I was researching. I was up 2, 3 o'clock in the morning a lot of times. I got dragged into all sorts of things that would be another story to do with COVID, nothing to do with David's story. But I was getting familiar with the process. And it's like, okay, why am I supposed to look at this? It was a heading that stated, false positive PTR tests are not a problem.
PCR.
And my reaction was, what? So I opened up what's going on. Well, what it was an article written by a investigative journalist out of Australia who had seen that article on a paper written by this Dr. Ian Mackay. And he was saying, what kind of person could say this? So he read the article, and ironically, everything in the article, he felt, said the opposite. That it really should be a concern.
Mm-hmm.
So he did a whole deep dive into who Ian Mackay was, and that's what this article I opened up was. And I found out who Ian Mackay was, what he was now involved with. And then I tied and realized that the problem David had wasn't with McMaster, wasn't with his overseer, the head of the lab.
Yep.
It was with his coworker. So he'd already had me involved with the lawyer. So I told David, you got to tell her to call me. We got to make her aware of this. So made her aware of it on 2 different phone calls with different information, but initiated by me. And what was it? A week, 2 weeks later,
Yeah.
she calls him and said, David, I have to drop you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Some new information has come up that has made me aware that I have a conflict of interest. Interesting, right?
But she didn't explain the conflict of interest. Just said there's a
So
conflict. Okay.
we'll explain that if you want me to.
Yeah, go for it.
So I told David, I'd already told her I was just giving you a base map quickly of all the facts. Now you can deal with David by text or by whatever. You've got the information. That's what I wanted to make sure my friend had good representation.
Mm-hmm.
The last phone call was, David, we need to meet because there's something else I have to talk to her about. So I just basically said, I got a question for you. Where did this information come from that you believe gave you a conflict of interest, right? She didn't want to tell us. eventually I led her to realize that I'm just asking you to verify what I know. I'm not asking you to give me any information. So the bottom line of all that was that I was pretty sure, and her silence I feel verified, she didn't have a conflict of interest. She was like everybody else. Doctors, lawyers, MPs, knowing what was really behind it, wanted nothing to do with it. They wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. She just wanted out. But in the process, she lied to her client. So I advised David, and I don't know what he's done with this, I advised David that he needed to contact the bar.
Yeah.
And
no, I've done nothing.
and my advice to him on that conversation, so she heard it, was that she would then have to verify to the bar what her conflict is. We didn't need to know, but they needed to know, if he wanted to push it, what her real conflict was, to verify she actually had one. Anyway, that was just done purposely. But that was the end of that.
And it turned out Ian had a ties with China and WEF.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's what this writer had put in there.
Yeah.
That's who he was now tied to.
So I'm right on the edge.
You know too much.
And I'm like, I won't. It's like, I'm a scientist. I make careful observations and I speak the facts. That's it. I don't care about politics. And so I was on leave for 10 weeks of silence. Things came back easily reutable. I'm called back to work, and in June I can work on anything but COVID related. In August, Mac only gives out one of these every year, Faculty of Health Sciences Postdoctoral Leadership Award for all of my work. And then I was fired early in October.
Okay, so you come back August to get an award, and you're fired in October.
Yeah.
For what cause?
Not doing enough work, and at the same time, as I'm off on leave, I'm publishing papers. I published 4. I pulled in research funds, and yeah. So
What work were you working on during this time? Because it's not COVID.
I published 3 papers on COVID and 20 early on when I was on leave
On his
But
own.
during this period where you're back,
on my own.
yeah, but during this period you're back before October, what were you working on?
COVID stuff.
Oh, but I thought you weren't supposed to.
Well, I was doing stuff with my other affiliates,
Okay. So now in October you're fired, and,
Yep.
and they're calling it with cause.
No, my contract was canceled early, so I would be out of their hair. And it turns out, after I'm left, Mac receives millions in Gates funding to focus on COVID stuff.
So what
really
did-
interesting about that is, so the claim that they had cultured the virus at Sunnybrook, we still have the news release in the newspapers, what they claimed the benefits were. That triggered millions of dollars of grant funding from the federal government. And later on, and I was part of looking for this through Freedom of Information requests, that was all proven to be a lie.
So,
Where the Freedom of Information requests say, no, this did not happen in a lab. The news, even the newspaper articles, it's obvious they were claiming it was done in a lab.
I don't know.
So it's quite interesting that basically that's the team he was part of and he was removed from.
Yep.
And I basically told David, I said, maybe the Lord was just protecting you from being involved in a fraud.
Possibly. So after you were fired, take us through the rest of what
I
happened.
found work elsewhere, and at that time there were all kinds of new labs popping up. FH Health, because our government mandated that you can't fly without a negative COVID test, and therefore there's all kinds of asymptomatic tests, and therefore a lot of new testing sites, new private testing labs set up. I was experienced in the field setting up tests, and I picked up a job as a lab director. I was there for 3 months. It's a startup lab, unlicensed, in a office block, not testing things right. There's high risk of piece of contamination. And so I challenged how things were being done to get the right test. The lab was doing 10,000 tests per week at about $100 a test. We're charging clients $195 a test. They're more concerned about making cash than doing right testing. And so I challenged things. I left there in April of 2021, picked up another lab 21. I was another lab director of a lab doing a symptomatic test for the lab's doing about 15,000 tests per
Life Lab.
Well, it's Life Lab sent samples to us.
Okay, because it's contracted by Life Lab.
Yeah, if it's a symptomatic patient, it was done by Life Labs. All of the asymptomatic work was sent to us.
Okay.
And I was there. I worked out things. It was well run, good test. I took my son on my day off to watch the convoy pass through Hamilton, and I was fired the next day.
How'd they know you did that? Did you post it or?
Yeah, it was on.
What would be interesting is to tell them who you were reporting to when you were directing that group of labs.
And this would have been January 2022?
Yeah,
When the convoys
that
went
was
through?
January of T2. Yeah.
Yeah. To who are you reporting to? It seems important to tell.
When you were doing the asymptomatic testing for Life Labs,
Yeah.
you told me you had to report to the Ontario government, the stats.
We were.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Because if you remember, at that period of time, Doug Ford came out with a decree that they were going to stop doing asymptomatic testing.
Yep.
Because, why? They were getting so far behind
Cost.
that they
way
couldn't
behind.
keep up, and it really wasn't important anymore anyway.
Yeah.
But there was a little fact behind the scenes that might have had something to do with that decision. What his statistical reports were actually showing.
And it's really all, and it's cool because I was let go Feb 1st, and by March, the labs doing asymptomatic testing were shut. Going back, March 8th, no, March of 20, I wrote a pandemic plan for the church. And I asked my church eldership, if this pandemic comes here, what's our plan for the church? And I was told there is no need, it's not coming here, so what's the big deal? The church was shut the next week. That Thursday, I wrote a plan for the church on giving people hope and help. Because if they're sick, we must care for them, give people hope. And so at the convoy on February 12th, 22, was the first time I stood on stage in front of thousands. And I called out the church and I said, if Christ died in vain, and we have no hope here except in him. Like in the pandemic, people wanted hope.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's no hope in Jesus, we as a society don't have hope. And so I called out the church for being shut, for not doing their role, for going out. And it was June of 20 when all of the Black Lives Matter marches occurred. I contacted my friend in the Ford government and I said, why are the church shut? If Black Lives Matter can march and fight for what's right, why can't we as a church be open and teach what's right? That was a Friday afternoon. She took the message to her board meeting. At that thing is a Muslim and a Jew. They agreed, passed the things on to the policy team, and Doug Ford on the Monday announced the churches can now reopen.
To now reopen. Wow.
And it's the first time in the history of the church that for a infectious disease, the church shut. It showed the fear of this was greater than people's faith.
Right. And then so February, let's go back to February 2022. So February 12th, you're on stage.
I
For the first
was
time?
on the stage for first time. It was Bridal up first, Bonnie Millard, Neil Carroll, myself, and then Bulford, and then Peckford.
Wow. So the 12th and the 14th is when the declaration of the Emergencies Act.
Yep.
19th is when they cleared out Ottawa.
Exactly.
So a week later. So maybe some of these conversations are a little bit too freedom of speech.
Yeah. So I was there, and then I took another job.
This is job number 4.
That's job number 4. Let's not go there. And then in the fall, in September, I taught at Redeemer as a sessional assistant prof teaching microbiology, genetics, and PCR testing. And I held nothing back. I'm like, this is the science, this is the facts of the pandemic. I'm going to teach things as it is. And I did. I applied for a full-time tenure track job there. I was replaced with a less experienced Chinese woman scientist who, in that fall, invited myself back to a guest lecture mild course, a 2-hour lecture on the science of COVID. And I had just pulled in with a research team, which I was a co-applicant on, $500,000 of federal funds to investigate the pandemic response. Mm-hmm. And I was out of a job for the 5th time. And yeah, it sucked. It hurt, except it was God's way of clearing off my time. And I had met Speicher in 21, Dark with his team, September of 21, and therefore, in June, July, when I was free, I was asked to test vaccine vials from Ontario, from Maria Gucci, and confirm the DNA contamination and the SV40 found by Kevin Kiernan 3 months before. And so at that time, Dr. Bridal was out of his lab office and stuff, and I had lab access. And I saw his colleagues who harassed him, and I'd see him, I'd say hi, talk to him, and I was asked what am I working on. I told him something really big, huge, cool. And I was asked, what if? I said, I'll find out. You'll find out once it's out. And my son, in October of 23, he said, Dad, if this will save people's lives, it needs to go out. And I was worried about being teased, sidelined, ostracized. And I put out our work at 3:30 a.m. October 19th. And 6 hours later, Epoch Times reports out, Health Canada confirms there's DNA in the COVID shots. And it's God's way of saying, if you're against me, you're against Health Canada. If you're supporting them, you'll support our work.
Fantastic.
And that's when things took off, the Australian vials, the David Clarkson. And so I've not had a full-time paid job since May of 23. It's been tough. I have had some very dark times on my own. And if it's not been God's path, God's hand in this, I would not be here where I am now.
God bless you for keeping that going. And you were also invited to contribute with Dr. Gary Davidson in the Alberta response report commissioned by Premier Danielle Smith.
Yep.
Obviously, your reputation is still strong amongst your colleagues who are searching for this and working into this.
Yeah.
Can you briefly touch on that? Because I know you have another commitment that we got to get you to.
Yeah, my son's base
Your miracle
balls
son,
in
that
and
you don't know
out.
how it was created.
He's awesome.
Yeah.
And so I have Pierre lab experience. Gary reached out to me to help the report on the PCR part. I looked at it and I wrote most of that up because I knew nationwide which labs were doing what test, how things were being done. And so it's a good test if it's used right. It should never have been used on people without symptoms. And all it tells is this RNA or DNA piece in my sample. It doesn't tell if you're sick.
Mm-hmm.
That's all clinical. So it's a good test if it's used right, coupled with a physician's examination of the patient.
Wow.
And that's
It's
it.
basically hijacked as a tool of an agenda.
Of course.
In the early days, David will chuckle about this, but I was challenged to tell him this. David, you need to second guess and question everything you think you know about COVID and the PCR test. And we had some down and out ugly conversations.
Yeah, we have.
Who are you to question my profession? Said, I'm not the one, I'm just the messenger. I don't even know why, I'm just being told you to question everything. David knows now he could have easily been on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He
He probably made a lot of money
If he
and-
hadn't been
Oh, yeah.
suspended, he'd have gone with the program.
Those who have sidelined me have faculty positions in Saskatchewan and stuff, and I'm currently out of work doing big front-end science, and it's quite ironic, touching that earlier this year, Australia, based on my work on their vials, named the David Declaration based on my work.
The David
The
Declaration.
David Declaration.
Fantastic.
And there was movement in Florida and Oklahoma too.
Yeah, the whole Florida thing is based on ours, and the whole North group and all to them whole 19, and so it's all been where God's had things be.
I think you have a bigger purpose here, a larger purpose.
So most have never heard of my path and the fights I've been in, and I've basically lived the past 5 years on the front lines.
God bless you.
And a lot of other people learned this lesson too, but sadly, not always is doing the right thing monetized in this world. Sometimes doing the right thing is going to cost you,
Yeah.
and it
Correct.
still needs to be done.
Yeah.
So,
They go after your profession, your reputation, your
Yeah.
future, and sometimes even your family. So,
or worse.
or worse. Yeah.
Yeah.
The silence, how they try to silence you is through pressure and stress and threats.
Yeah.
And we see this all the time too, even as journalists. Doing this show is going to get you a lot more attention, but also some negative attention. And that's going to happen. But I'm really glad that you shared your story. Is there any more pieces of your story you want to make sure it gets out there today?
No, I think that's.
There's a lot more pieces
Well,
of the story, but not enough time.
There's lots of. I encourage all of those out there to, even though things are hard and tough, to keep doing the right thing. If there's someone out there who wants to support good science in this, which is to make a difference, reach out, because it's been a hard battle.
Absolutely.
And I'm still in this. I'm still fighting. It's tough. Our cash is tight, but I'm living by faith, and God each month has come through.
Well, we'll share your links and we'll make sure that gets out there. And we need to support people like you, the truth tellers, the ones that took the sacrifice. 5 jobs later, and you're still working for the truth and making sure it gets out there.
I'm still going.
You're still going, David. God bless you so much. And Dal, thank you so much for being there for him.
Thank you.
Whatever the calling was, you followed it. And you provided him with some very, very useful information. David, I think this is just the beginning of something much, much bigger.
It sure is.
I think all of these emails and recordings that you've collected, I think it might be time for some of this to start coming out. And maybe some accountability. And it's going to scare some people.
Oh, yeah.
So you stay safe out there, and you make sure you listen to Del some more, especially if he's coming to you with more than just an oil change. He's coming with some information and some guidance and very good friendship, it looks like, here too.
Yeah.
God bless you both.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Jason.
Well, there you have it. The story is coming out. It's about time David's truth comes out. And he's been helping everybody behind the scenes and in public. He was there in Ottawa to share the truth and even calling out the church. Everybody's now listening. The global TV is starting to break it. We have problems with the VIS program. Texas, Florida, Utah, Australia. This is now coming out. And if you want to help people like David, check out the description. You'll find some links and you can get involved to make sure this research, this man, and the information that we need to move forward gets out there. Thank you for your time, and God bless.